All right, we are recording. It's July 12th,
11?
July 11th. The 12th is my wife's birthday. Tomorrow's her birthday, so 2023, and I'm talking to Brian Farris here.
Farris.
Without the H, I'm sorry.
Uh-huh.
Here at the Monroe County Historical Association at 748 Main Street. We're down the street because the mansion's under construction. So, and we're here to talk to Brian about the 55 flood. Brian, you obviously lived around here then. How old were you and where were you when the flood hit?
Well, first of all, we moved in on Barnum Street in 1951 from over here on 8th and Ann Street down here.
And for us, those of us that don't know, where's Barnum? Where was
Barnum Street is right off of Day Street, right down from the fireman's
over in East Stroudsburg.
East Stroudsburg, yes.
On the flats, they call that there.
Yes, and our house was 125 Barnum Street, and it actually faced the park. Like I say, center field of the baseball at the park, and you know, we had best of all worlds down there with the park and the swimming pool, but usually went to the Broadheads Creek to swim and mess around. But I was 12 years old when the flood hit.
Okay.
I was with my mother that night. But first of all, during when Connie came through, the first hurricane came through, it really put a lot of rain down. But in August of that year, we were so dry. Everybody was praying for rain. We need rain, rain, rain. You know, everything was down. And I always said, you gotta watch what you pray for sometimes now. But anyway, we were, there was like 4 of us. We always had like old truck inner tubes that we would get from either down at Baton Ridge, and they'd patch them for $1. You know, you get a big tube. And so we took them that day. We took up after the first hurricane came through. We went up to by the Little League Stadium there, where the Sambo Creek is. They've changed the name on that now. But 4 of us went up there, and we pushed off into the water with the inner tubes. No life vest or anything like that. Back then, you didn't think about it.
This is after the first hurricane?
After the first one, right
after. Was it a sunny day this day?
It was sunny day, but the water was rampant. I mean, it was just brown, real dark brown, but white caps, like it was so rapid. I mean, you know, like I said, we lived on the creek down there. We trapped, we fished, we swam, we did everything. So, but this was really rough. But we, as teenagers at 12, we said, So we pushed out with the tubes out into the water, and there was a cable down around the corner, and we sent it down. I'm not sure if I should be mentioning names of everybody that's there.
I'm curious. I was just going to ask, Who are these guys you're talking about?
Well, one fella that was there, it was Gwen Jones. He graduated my class. We sent him down along what was the bank then, you know, to lower the cable. When we came around the corner, we could grab a hold of it, you know, because we didn't want to keep on going, you know. And the other one was Norm Fish, and the other one was Wayne Melvin, and myself. And so we all pushed off and come around the corner, and we looked up on the bank up there where Wayne was supposed to be lowering the cable, and he put it down too low, and it grabbed it, and so we didn't have anything to grab a hold of. So we are just freelancing down there, just going down, just flying down there with the water so rampant. And in our minds, we always heard of the paper mill dam. Well, we didn't know where that was at as kids, you know. We knew it was somewhere on that stream, but, you know, it was way down, wouldn't have affected us, but we didn't know that. So all of a sudden, we got to a point that we came around when we saw that this was out of control. We went to the Eastburg side, where the trees and brush grew into the stream, and we just all went in there. I just let go of my tube and jumped and grabbed the brush, you know, and then we all pulled ourselves in. Well, one of the fellas, it was Wayne Melvin. His dad just bought him a brand new pair of sneakers. Well, when he came up out of the water, he only had one sneaker on, so he had to go home and tell his dad, you know. Times back then, you know, a pair of sneakers, shoes were, you know, hard to come by, you know. And Norm Fish said he lost some, but his were old, so he didn't worry about that. But I didn't have any. I just went down, in the tube. But so anyway, we got through that, and got back home, and it all of a sudden it kept on raining. Well, that night was the bingo night at the bingo stand, and
so it must have started raining after you got in the river, right?
Well, no, it was a sunny day. We got home.
Okay.
The other one hadn't come up yet. It hadn't come to that point
so then
yet.
later that night it starts raining.
Later that night it started really pouring, rain. And everything was pretty well saturated from the first hurricane. And so anyway, my mom worked with the Firemen's Auxiliary. Those buildings that, the pictures of the buildings, they were brought in there from Tobyhanna. I remember them bringing them down in sections. And they built that, as you can see, when it's collapsed, right? It was all crunched up. I got pictures of it crunched up. They were all put together. I watched them assemble that in that area down there. Like I said, so we actually went and we were working the stand. My mom was working the food, the food and the sodas, whatever. And I was peddling into people while they were playing bingo. Mm-hmm. In fact, one of my teachers, 5th grade teacher, was there. Her name was Miss Van Gordon. She taught my mother's mother, my sister, and myself, in the bundle school. And so anyway, I was out peddling stuff there, and it rained. And when you looked out the door there, it was like a parking lot, but it wasn't really. I don't think it was asphalt. It was grass, whatever, but rock. It was just like a pond out there anyhow, where all the cars were parked. Just then, a guy came in the door, and I looked up and I recognized him. He lived just down past our house across the street. There was an apple orchard, then there was the Marts, and then this guy named Herb Hissam. I want people to know his name, because I attribute him to saving 100 of people or more in that store.
What time was this that he came in?
Probably around 9:30, I'd say, roughly. I think usually the game goes till 10. And I saw him come in, and I went up to the door because they had the stage where the gentleman calling, the balls for the numbers. Mm-hmm. Leaned down. He stopped and leaned down, and I heard him talk to the gentleman there that you might want to warn people that the water's coming up on the back streets, and some of these little bridges, they might have a hard time getting home. And that was all he said. Then he left. And what happened was they had the big pot. I think it was a $500 pot, to cover all or something. And they had a couple others. Well, what they did was they put them all together, to hurry up the game, Mm-hmm. And I went over to Miss Van Gordon, and I said to her, I told them what's coming up, and she says, I walked down here. She says, so, I'm going to leave because it's not, money in this game's not worth it for me. I got to walk. So she walked, and I talked to her later after, and she said she got up on Lenox Avenue by Plants and Design. The water just came behind her, but she was elderly at the time. Wow. And so anyway, they put the games together there. I didn't see many people leaving. They put it all together and they got done with it, and everybody left. We walked out, and boy, it was like flooded there, and it was still pouring rain. And we walked up Barnum Street because we were right down from the bingo stand. Walk down the street, and there it is. And we got up to the house, and the water was coming in our house. Our house was built on a little bit of a hill on the left-hand side, and we had a garage actually underneath our house, that you could put a car in, which we never did because of insurances and stuff, And truth of the matter is, we didn't have but one car, and I don't think it was worth putting in there. We didn't have much money. But anyway, we were there, and then all of a sudden the fire company came down with a truck.
Now, did you say the water was in your house at this point?
Oh yeah, it was coming in our basement.
When you were walking up to the house, are you trudging through water? Standing water?
No, because the road kind of went from Day Street, It was like a uphill type of a thing, and then there's like we were kind of like on a plateau area, and our house was. And if you figure we had a garage underneath our house, and how high the water was, but the garage door was bowing. And my dad had just bought my sister and I from 2 Schwinn bikes that we had down in the basement down there. And we always had water come in with heavy rains. We used to put newspapers to keep it from coming in our basement there, our drive. But anyway, we went down and got the bikes, and our door down there, our garage door was bowed. The water was coming in, and the water was going right by our house down between there and the houses below. And anyway, the fire truck came down, and they were trying to get through that water to get to people, but it was so swift that it was still coming up. And I remember I looked. We had a street light right out in front of our house, and it lit up everything. So, and it's dark, it's nighttime, and the house next to us was white, and kind of reflect off of that, and you could see reflection of houses down below. And all of a sudden, I turned around, and I saw this fella come walking down. He had like light shirt, and I'm not sure if he had shorts on or Bermuda shorts or something like that, or long pants. And he starts to try to get through that water to get down to save somebody and his family down there. And he got swept away right in front of our eyes. Okay. And we just stood there. Everybody stood there because he went into the darkness. And everybody, it happened so quick. We're just all in shock. What happened? And
is this guy screaming or anything? Is he yelling?
No, he didn't yell. And we're standing there, and he went off into the dark, and nobody could do. He heading out towards the park, out in the water. Water had gone through by our house there, and they said that was probably in its time was a normal low spot where a stream used to come at one time. And things changed. So all of a sudden, a few minutes later, I turned around, and he came around our house, and I looked, and now his shirt was white, but he was white, and he caught onto our rain spout going by our house and saved him, So anyway, now the firemen still can't get down to get anybody. It's just the water's coming up, and it's so swift going by our house there. And so I walked back up to the hill, and I looked down towards Day Street, and I saw a wall of water. At the end of Day Street, they used to have all the carnivals and in the bingo stands, and and they had a hot dog stand right there, and there was a fire plug right there. In fact, that's where they used to come and bring the circus. They brought the elephants there to water the elephants, and spray them down. I looked down Day Street, and I saw the wall, a big wall of water hit, and all of a sudden, it's gone. Now we're trapped. We can't go anywhere. We can't go this way, that way. We're trapped. The fire truck is there, and it was there with the guys trying to rescue. And I talked to he was head of civil defense, Marv Abel, his name was. He was the fire chief, and he told him. He said, "Don't take the truck down there." Well, they did, and now it's stuck. Well, I go back to the house, and we had an apartment over our house, and the people just moved over to the next street on the other side of the apple orchard on Lenox, and so it was vacant yet. We hadn't, rented it yet, and so anyway, I said to my mom, and we had a friend that came over that was friends with my mom and dad, the Yules. I played football with his son, Ray Yule, in high school in 61, 60, in that area. And but anyway, they're friends, and so all of a sudden she's going to get help. I thought she was going up to get her husband and 2 sons to help us get stuff up out of our basement, not realizing that the water was going to be up to our top of our fireplace. Oh my God. But anyway, and I thought my sister went with her, and so I didn't kind of worry about that. Well, in the meantime, my dad was a drinker. He was an alcoholic, and he was up in the apartment. Of course, he's all upset now that this is happening to the house in '55. We just bought it in '51. Actually, my aunt and uncle bought it and worked it out, and we finally got it paid off in '73. But so I said to my mom, I said, "Come on, we'll take the dog and we'll go over to the Gardeners." They were the German family that had the apple orchard and the land there. Mm-hmm. And so we walked up and walked around the fire truck, and there's a house back there. The gentleman's name was Van Busker, lived in there. And these people, even though they lived there, we didn't really know them as neighbors like we probably should have. Mm-hmm. Even Herb Hisson, we didn't. We knew he was there. He was just low-keyed type person. Mm-hmm. And so we started walking through the old dirt, gravel, oyster cell driveway through his property to get to the Gardener's house, which is over on Lenox Street. And I kept looking down to the right, which was, Day Street, and the houses along there. And all of a sudden I could see, with the lights there, I could see water coming up. And before we got halfway over there, the water was up to my chin. I was holding my mom and our dog up in the air, tiptoeing, trying to get to that house. It came up that fast. And I just couldn't understand, And I saw later they said it came up 15 feet in 9 minutes, So I can understand now. I just couldn't understand how that came up that fast and how we... So we got to the back of the house, and there's a concrete... The house is still there, and it's kind of like a little dip, and then there's a concrete, like you walk up the concrete, and then the back porch, and into the house. Well, we got there, and we walked in there, and I looked out, and we were in the house there, and the water really came up, and I mean, it was roaring, and it came from about an inch of coming up on their first floor. And there was 28 people in that house that got so far and got trapped, and they just had to find a place for refuge, and they all came in there, people from Lenox, whatever. And so anyway, they had to put a stepladder up to go up into their attic, because we didn't know how much more was going to come up. And right across from the Gardener's house on Lenox there was a 4-family house, and there's the Mumbauers lived in there. There was people. The next to there was a Sodelniks lived in the house there, and there's an alleyway right between the 2 houses there. And so anyway, they had to put a ladder up into that attic. And when we got up in the attic, it wasn't a finished attic. So we had to lay stuff down, something flat, and they could get up through the hole up into the attic, and people stayed over there. And of course, I got up there with my mom and the dog, and I worked my way down. We kind of just straddled on the ceiling joists up there, and we went to the back window, up there. But before I got up into there, we were looking out the window, okay? And I had the window open. I was looking down towards Day Street, and the house right below us was Schock's. I went to school with Billy Schock, and his parents lived there. And right next to that house was Mrs. Neville. They never found her body to this day. Really? Yeah. She just... Stories were that somebody tried to rescue her, and supposedly had her tied to the telephone pole across the street with his belt, and when they came back, the belt was there, but she was gone. So something might have swept her off. I don't know if that's true. I didn't see it, but that's the story I heard. But anyway, I looked out the window, and all of a sudden I saw like a torpedo going by. It was a propane tank. It went, going with the water, right by the window. I saw a motorboat come up, and the Schocks had 4x4 posts for a clothesline, and it was just below the water line. And I knew that, and I saw this motorboat coming up trying to rescue people. Oh, and I kept saying, well, don't, boom! They hit the prop. Now the boat just spun around, and there they go. They went down, And like I said, the firemen looking down there, they were up. They put the ladder up on the fire truck, and they were all on the saving their life on there. They were sitting on ladder trying to, keep from drowning, And then I think the motorboats finally rescued them off of there, But at the window up there, we were at the back, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, if this house goes, I said, go for the apple trees. I said, it's all I can do. I'll do what I can to help you, save you. But I said, we're going to be on our own in mostly if this goes.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you're in the attic.
Yes.
I assume there's no electricity, so
no,
it's pitch black.
It's pitch black up there, yeah. Okay. But looking out, even though still somehow or other the street lights were still on, and I could see our house. I could see our house across there. And in fact, I could see the motorboat coming around there. And my dad was up in the apartment up there with the window there, and the motorboat came over and he says, are you all right? We could hear it. It was desolate. The only thing you could hear all night was the screams for help. Oh, it was bad.
It was fairly quiet.
It was desolate in that respect. You could hear the water, rushing by, but it was other than the water and then the screams,
Had it stopped raining at this point?
Yes, it had. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it had. Yes. And so anyway, the motorboat came over there, and of course, my dad, he had a few too many, that was his life, it's an alcoholic, and he was up there and he yelled out to the guys. The guy came over in the motorboat and he says, do you have any cigarettes? He was a smoker at the time, And the guy said, yeah. So that's how they could almost reach it, get up to him, that's how high the water was, Then he said, do you have any matches? The guy said no. And my mom and I said, well, he really must be messed up. He's got a candle right there burning right behind him. But anyway, yeah, and then, like I say, we stayed there, and then all of a sudden the water, receded down, but it happened at dark and night, from 10 o'clock right through until the sun came up, the water had started going down, but we didn't leave the house until, it got light, and by that time the water was still trickling down Day Street, not roaring, but trickling. You could walk, and I had a pair of white bucks on. Of course, I waded through all that water. The clothes I had was all wet. Everything was ruined. Plus, we lost everything in our house. I mean, everything was gone. I mean, the water was so high, we lost everything. So anyway, we started walking back through the area again that we came through, heading towards the fire truck, and a lot of people had gotten out of the place, and they were walking too, and I kept seeing people, going down to Day Street, and that was like fields back in there, but there were these cars, and they saw their cars of the family that was trying to escape. Anyway, they screamed. They ran over and, see if their loved ones are in there, but they weren't, so they lucked out there. But anyway, I went to the house there, and my dad was, we were all, I'll be honest with you, this is something that you never get over. I think I have PTSD, whatever that from it still, as you know, when I talked to you before, I couldn't get through it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we got to the house there, and of course, my dad had opened the front door and the back door to try to let the water go through, and because the mud was like a foot deep in our first floor, and so we got in there, and of course, my dad, and we're just crying, exhausted. So anyway, my shoes were really shot, and wet, and muddy, and my uncle and aunt went to Holland, and when they went to Holland, they brought back a souvenir of a pair of old wooden Holland shoes, and they barely fit, but I squeezed my feet into it, so I click-clocked out of there, walked all the way up. We walked all the way uptown, and people were looking at us like strange. What's wrong with these people? They didn't realize what happened. They didn't realize that this flood had hit, And, like I said, so we got uptown there. Now we finally somehow or another connected with my sister. She never did go and marry Yule. She went looking for us. and she got over to Lenox there, right before the hill by Plants and Designs there, going up to, Portland Street or whatever. And she said she was coming down there looking for us. She said she had to run for her life. She said the water was biting at her heels. So she goes all the way down to the fire company, and the civil defense gave her a flashlight, and she stayed all night, the rest of the night, at Henry Street there, trying to keep people from driving down into the water. She became a civil. They hired her for that, but so we went up there, and then we ended up going up to the Yules. They lived off of Smith Street in Spangenberg. They have a house on that corner up there. They did. And it's still there. And they offered us, we could sleep on the floors. We could stay at their house. We didn't have nothing but the clothes on our back. And so we were there. And that night, my sister and I are sitting out on the front porch, looking down towards the College Way. Down there, it was all fields down there. And I remember that. We're still in shock. This is something that I just never. It was terrible. We looked down there, and all of a sudden, the shadow of the night sun going down made it look like the water was coming up again. Oh, I panicked. I panicked. I screamed, and they had to calm me down. But so anyway, we spent after the flood. There was a place next to a restaurant there. They had a little small restaurant next to the Grand Theater across from the Methodist Church. We got our shots and everything at the Methodist Church. We had to go. Red Cross had to set us up with. We got some bunk beds. Military. Whatever, not bunk beds, but cots. And we were able to stay in our upstairs apartment since nobody was there, and we had running water. I don't think you could drink it. We had to bring bottled water, but that gave us a chance to still try to work and clean the mud out and stuff of our house, And every time we'd go up, they had National Guard there, and we'd wait. They got to know us, let us down in, It was just back and forth, back and forth. In fact, school was, I think, delayed until November.
So they restricted access to the area.
Oh yeah,
just to people that lived there.
Yeah, keep people from going in and robbing and poaching, taking whatever people might have there. Trying to keep that from happening. And but I looked out into the park, and the park over there. In fact, there's a water line up when you walk up into the pool area there. There's actually a water line. How high it was. And there was all types of cars down into there. The fences were tore down. There was cars all over there on the other side of Day Street there, just heading up towards Rudy's up that direction. There used to be a trailer park there, and all the trailers were all washed in a pile. And there was a maintenance building that the borough used to have right there. And now it's a youth center, I think now, but. They used to make fireworks in there, and we as kids used to watch them because they had their own fireworks displays and stuff. And it was all piled up there. And they did find a body down back behind the park there, where the stream used to go down there. Somebody, I don't know who it was, but they found it. When somebody went to jump for what they thought was a high spot, it was not a high spot. It was actually a body. But anyway. The place was just, like I say, we bought the place in 1951, and like I said, we the people who was in our apartment was Ben Bensley and Maud and Ben Bensley. They were from up in Dingman's Ferry, and they decided they had bought a half-acre lot next to our property, between there and Ager Pana's garage and junk cars, and. So anyway, they decided they had bought it to build there, and they decided, no, they're going to go back up, they call it God's Country, up to the old homestead up there, and they're going to build a house up there. So they sold the lot to us. So we had a full acre of lot there, and we had a garden there. But I remember my sister and I, we picked rocks. Oh my goodness, my dad had us out there wheelbarrowing rocks and dumping them over the bank, Well, after the flood, it seemed like they harvested all over again. It was all back there.
I want to ask you a question, and you don't have to talk about this because I know you're still
Yeah.
very emotionally.
Yeah.
This was a tough story. I don't know how any of us would deal with living through what you lived through. But when we were talking about the quiet of the night after the rain stopped, you mentioned you could hear people screaming.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't want to talk about it, but do you remember anything specific about that?
Oh, it's just all over. People, especially down below us, they were, they were really in deep water, And
So are we talking about people that are maybe in a house, but they're worried that the water's going to come up?
Yes,
And so
yes,
there's trees
yes,
for somebody to come and save them?
I don't think it was anybody outside hanging in a tree or something like that.
Okay.
I don't think, but it was mostly, I think, people were in homes that they didn't know if it was going to get higher, if their house was going to get washed away.
Mm-hmm.
Down at the end of my street right there on Barnum Street, and you interviewed Janet, my son-in-law's mother, and her house was right at the edge. There was no dike there. You went down to the end of Barnum Street, and there's like a woods and banks, and you pushed through the banks, and there was like a drop off, and there was a creek down below you. And like I said, she was there, and she told her story. They got onto a roof next to the house next to them. There was the Sheldon down there. That was her family, with her father, and a coal truck, Smith's coal truck that was just up over in Lenox, came down with the water and hit their house. It was a small house. It wasn't, probably it was a block house or whatever, cinder block, and just wiped it right up, completely tore it away. But they got rescued off the roof of the other house in motorboats and took them up to by Rudy's, and that's where they were dropping people off up there, staging it. And like I said, that was there was P.T. Barnum. He had crossed on Lenox there. He used to have horses there. He was Barnum Bailey circus, and he used to have his a lot of his circus equipment and stuff. And there was a barn in the back there that I think he operated out of it. Like I said, there was the Brenda Metzger was right next to the apple orchard, and there was a pathway through the apple orchard that went over to Lenox, and people going to the park, kids all over there used to come through there, and they behaved, and they'd walk through our yard, and we'd give them permission to go down, so they have to walk out in the road.
Things were different then, weren't
Yes.
Things were different.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, everything was different back then. You could. You had so much fun there, and everybody, all the kids were, we walked to school. We walked up to school up there, and like I say, when I went back to school.
Now you said it didn't start until when? October?
I think it was even November.
November.
Yeah, they couldn't, because everything was, Bushkill, all these bridges. East Stroudsburg was stranded. There was no way in or out by helicopter.
Let me ask this while I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
You lived through a very intense part of it, but that was just a part of it. When did it dawn on you that this was a much bigger flood that affected people all over?
Something I was still so devastated that I was really trying to hang on to what I had close by. I didn't realize all this happened,
Interesting.
I was just so, I hate to say that, being a man.
You were 12 years old, right?
I was 12 years old, and it was, so devastating, it's something that, I could say another thing, but that may get my tears going, but I don't want to do that.
Did you remember hearing about Pine?
Yeah.
Pinecrest.
Oh my goodness, I'll think of it. Yeah. I heard about that, and they were saying, word got out, they were looking for, the bodies and stuff like that, and I heard where they found some bodies like Stokes' Mill up there. There was somebody in a tree, a lady in a tree who was drowned and stuff, and it's just the camp up there. The word got out, but again, it was just so devastating. You know, I think I was just trying to get my composure, I think, in one direction of just go with the flow or whatever, you know. But like I said, one thing, here's something else that I realized too, was we had a garage door underneath our house, you know. So, like I told you before, and I could never get through this because the Mennonites came down, and my dad and I were exhausted, you know, devastated and exhausted. And guys came down, and they actually said, we'll take care of it. And they went and cleaned our whole basement out, hauled all our stuff out to the curb for the loader to come pick up, hosed down everything, you know. We hosed upstairs first, you know, trying to get the mud down the steps, and you know, it was a foot in our first floor. And you know, they never asked for anything, you know.
And you lost your bikes.
Oh, well, no, the bikes are upstairs, but I don't know. Yeah, you know, they were there. They didn't mean nothing to us at that point in life. You know, we didn't have any clothes. Everything, the water was up our everything. We lost everything. I mean,
but you were lucky to have the place upstairs, right?
That was the best thing that, you know, that happened. We were very fortunate to have that. You know?
How long did it take you to get the downstairs back to?
Oh, well, we had to get contractors in. You know, our hardwood floors had got all warped and this and stuff, and most of them went back together. They said once you get heat, it'll maybe go back. But they had to tear out the walls up so high where the water was to get the, you know, so the molds and you know, ripped our walls out, and they tore all our cupboards, our cabinets out, everything. You know, it was just tore out of there. And but yeah, and they came. We got people, and then we had to get bids. Red Cross was fantastic, though. I mean, they really they got us furniture, you know, chair, couch, you know, beds, you know, and stuff like that, so we could live there. Once we got the place in order.
So the first floor's gone. There's no furniture.
Nothing. There was nothing other than the fireplace was. That didn't go. I mean, it was still there, you know. Huh. But yeah, and like I said, the shocks. They were down in front, you know, they lived down there, Billy and Mike and his mom and dad, and we used to play, yeah, I mean, like I say, the neighborhood's a neighborhood, and they told me that they tried to, they got in their car to get out. Well, they started up Day Street, and that's when the water came up. So here they are, just being pushed along with water, you know, and their engine actually conked out, and the water's coming up in the car, they said, and all of a sudden they felt this boom behind them, and they thought, they didn't think, and all of a sudden it pushed them all the way up the hill to Day Street. Here was a big tractor trailer with pipes up high enough that they could go to the water. Wow. And when they opened the doors, the water ran out. The water was coming in their car. And they jumped out to thank him, and the guy blew the horn, they said, and he took off. Well, I found out later that guy had saved, I don't know how many people. He actually burned his engine up in his truck. And the people found out about it, and they went and bought him a new engine.
Do you know his name?
No, I do not. And a month later, he was going through an intersection over in Stroudsburg, and somebody hit him and killed him.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. But anyway, so anyway, we like I said, we went. I was going at this point to the J.M. Hill School. Okay, J.M. Hill School. My middle name's Hill. And it's getting a little off track, but anyway, my dad was born in 1900. Like I said, he was over in Hawaii in the Calvary. In fact, I found some old paper that he got a pass over there in 1922. He was there in 1917. And he got a one-day pass over there. And my name is spelled Farris. Well, my dad's name was Faris. He changed the name to get jobs working up in the mines up in Wilkesboro, up Scranton. But anyway, I saw that. I said, "There's proof." Anyway, but he, like I said, he was at, you know, you say I was 43 years, born in 1943, so he was 43 years old. My mom was 27. So, you know, I had older parents, you know. he worked at the Penn Stroud. He worked over at the engine works over on the Stroudsburg side down here where these Jacobson, I mean, it was not Jacob, it was Worthington Mowers. Worthington Mowers also had Shawnee, Worthington. Mm-hmm. And anyway, he got a job offer from the Von Brooks to be at the Penn Stroud. So my dad worked at the Penn Stroud, you know.
You have a picture of your dad. I wonder if we could show it. If we could.
Yes.
What's interesting about this picture you were showing us earlier is this one survived the flood.
Yep.
And if you, I'm going to do this for you since you're holding it up, but this is mud that this whole picture was underwater up to this line. This is the line of the high water. That's his dad, by the way, of course. But there's mud here from the 55 flood down in the frame.
Yep.
And you hang this in your house?
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep, we have it. Yep, that's, proud of it, you know.
So when were you able to move back down? Was it like Christmas time or the next summer or when?
We stayed in our apartment, you know.
But eventually you must have come back down, right?
Yeah, I don't know how long it took, you know, because at that time there's not enough people to go around to do the work, you know, carpenters and stuff. You know, it was very hard to get some people to come in and tear things out. Now here's the other thing I want to mention. I talked to not only Norm Fish, who graduated with me, that went down the creek with us, and Earl Metzger didn't, but he lived over on Lennox. And he said, you know, the one thing I mentioned, both of them mentioned this, one thing I mentioned was we had to shovel the mud out of our basement or bucket it out of the basement. I had a garage door that we didn't have to. And they said, you can't believe, like Earl said, he had a small window. They had to put a shovelful out at a time and then twist the thing. You know, they had a foot of mud in their basements, you know, so that had to be really rough too, you know. And then he mentioned also, Earl mentioned that the Mennonites again came in and they did work and they, you know, on their floors and stuff and put new linoleum down and stuff like that. But it was difficult times, you know, and like I said, you had to go through a lot of paperwork, you know. But I remember going up in the old firehouse, well, the firehouse that's down there now is a car dealership or car repair now. And upstairs they had people donated clothes, and we went up there and, you know, tried to find clothes. We didn't have anything, you know, anything we thought would fit us, you know. And so, you know, we had hand-me-downs, but you know, they worked. It got to a point though, after a while, we were so still wiped out that my parents called my uncle, who was over in the Stroudsburg side over there, and we went up to Stokes's Mill. And the deals up there, they had their motorboats to take them. The bridges are out, you know, and so they took us across, you know, and my aunt and uncle were on the other side. They wanted to give us a break away from all this, right. You know, and so I was so scared. The water was, you know, there's that big slab of rock that goes out there and the water was buffing up over that and stuff. And I thought, oh, you know, water to me was just, you know, very scary.
You ever get over that, by the way?
Not really.
Yeah.
No. And then I worked at Shawnee down there with the river. You know, I mean,
you designed golf courses.
I built golf courses for Pete Dye. Yeah. I built them and built 3 of them for him, you know. So that could be sometime another story. I could tell you a lot of great stories there too. But yeah, I built golf courses. And
what about this? What about food? I mean, I know you're a kid, 12 years old, but
yeah.
What were there food shortages in the days and weeks right after the flood?
No, Red Cross, and then they came in with trucks. But like I say, our meals were every day. You know, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever. We're at that restaurant that you know, I guess the Red Cross paid for everybody, you know, for meals. I mean, we didn't. There's no way, you know. I mean, yeah, I guess we did take some water down, you know, or they donated water for us to drink because we still couldn't drink the water, you know, that was, you know, down there at that point. But our house, after, you know, well, in 1981, my dad had passed, you know, and then shortly after that, we sold the house. Well, there was a development going in across from us, from Harrisburg. They were putting in low-income housing, and they needed to put some drainage down through our property, and they had to have our permission, and I wouldn't give it to them. Truth of the matter is, I was against that going across, because some of the reputations of some of those developments gets pretty nasty, and I'm not trying to discriminate against anybody, but it was, and so this guy named O'Neill ended up buying us out, and we moved up on a house on Kiwanis Street that my dad was gone, but they bought it, and then they turned it into, it's a big apartment buildings down there now. They took a whole big acre there and they made it into some apartments.
Do you remember at some point as a kid, maybe a year later, maybe less than that, maybe 5 years later, coming to the realization that it's in the past now and I can start to enjoy life again, and be a kid?
Yeah.
I mean, I could see it in your face. It's still affecting you. And what is it, 68 years later? Well, I'm not very good with math.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, what happened is, even when I see now disasters, I know.
Yeah. Well, Brian, that was a fascinating story. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention today about the flood or about your experience?
Like I said, I was getting to the point that my middle name's Hill. Well, J.M. Hill School was named after Jake Hill, and he was a magistrate judge. And my dad he didn't go back to the mines. He left that area and came down, met my mother, and like I say, she was 16 years younger. And but anyway, he borrowed from Jake Hill $5 to get married. And he said, if I ever have a son, I'll name him after you. So here it is. Everybody says, how did you get the name Hill? That's the truth of the matter.
How about that?
But like I said, we had that place was great. There was so much fun down there. And, we could go out. The parents would yell at midnight, aren't you coming home? We'd go out and play town chase, prisoners base, you name it. And we were safe about it. The park was right there. We had the swimming pool, the park. We used to go. I didn't like the chlorine, as much, but we used to go to the broadheads there, and I fished, I trapped.
Things were different back then.
Things were back then. We used to go to Stokes' Mill, and it was a great place, and they stopped that because they, liability-wise, everything up there, but. Like I said, the main thing I really wanted to get out was that Herb Hissam, like I said, there were 6 people in there, and supposedly the 2 that I've tracked down or found out where they were from over on Ann Street, right there, and 8th Street. They lived along that left side one way, right before you got to 8th Street there. The other 4 of them drowned in there, and they just couldn't get out. And how those 2 survived, they said they were up underneath the roof where they had a wire, and there was just an air gap, and they were hanging on the wire. So you can imagine what those people went through. I'm not sure. Maybe they get through it easier than I did, but and even when I worked out every time it rained down at Shawnee down there, I mean, the river would come up. I've been through floods down there and fought the river, and and even when I went out to Pittsburgh, there was it rained hard out there. My mind would go, oh my goodness. And then here's the other thing: after the flood, I was in Dominican Republic building a golf course in 1972, around that area, when Agnes hit up in Wilkesboro. Well, of course, we got rain from it too. Well, the water came up on the broadheads, and over near the stadium over there, I can't remember the street, but there was a house that ended up in the creek. The water came down and bored a hole in there and took the house off. I think that person's name was Shaler. Their house was sucked off and and it set right in the middle of the Broadheads Creek. So I'm down at Dominican down there, and I'm at the hotel where I was staying, and I bump, people come down there, and I wonder what their business is they're doing down in Dominican. And this one guy, I said, what are you doing down here? He says, I'm building dams for the Dominican Republic to hold water in the hills up there, so they can have reservoirs, I said, oh, really? He said, where are you from? I said, Stroudsburg, Poconos. But, oh, he said, I built those dikes down here. I said, you built the dikes, huh? I said, well, how come it washed off a house over there by the thing? He said, that's where I ran out of materials. I was getting materials from South Stroudsburg. And Harrisburg said, come on, finish up the job, get it done. So they finished it up without finishing the dike.
No kidding.
So when I come back into town, I go right to the borough, and Don Gage, I think was the mayor at the time, or borough manager, whatever. I told him they brought Harrisburg in, and this guy gave me all the details of location, everything. So when the guys come in and they asked me, I went down, I told them, I said, this guy built the dikes here. He told me he ran out of materials. That's probably why, you know. And then they finished it then. But yeah, it's a small world, you know. You bump into a guy down in Dominican down there, you know.
Well, that might be a good story to end on, because it kind of wraps things up, brings it back to the beginning. Yeah. Well, thanks, Brian. That was great. You have any final words?
I just want to say, I feel sorry for people out there that's going through stuff right now. It's, you know, here's another thing is, back then when we had this, we didn't have the cell phones. We didn't have the communications. I think now it could be a help with the modernization, but devastation's devastation. Mother Nature, she is something hard to harness, and it seems like it's getting a little bit on the rougher side now, but yeah, my sister and I both think, and I feel sorry for people going through it. But
yeah, well, let's hope things improve. Right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.